Hello, I'm Steve Waterworth, Technical Marketing Manager at Weaveworks. In this session, we're going to show you how to use GitOps to deploy and manage service meshes. Weaveworks coined the term GitOps in 2017. We have customers across many industry verticals and are key partners with major cloud providers. We contribute to and maintain a number of open source projects. Weaveworks is backed by leading investors. The use of service meshes enables more dynamic deployment options. However, their configuration can be quite complex and a bit tricky to manage. As we're about to show you, using GitOps is a great way to operate service meshes with a safety net. Before we go into the details, it's worth explaining the ideas behind GitOps. The CNCF working group, Open GitOps, defines the 4 principles of GitOps as declarative. We're talking about service meshes on top of Kubernetes. Everything is declared in YAML files. Versioned and immutable. This is where Git comes in. It maintains an immutable version history of every commit. Pulled automatically and continuously reconciled. These are taken care of by Weave GitOps. Let's look at how Weave GitOps works. Weave GitOps is built on Flux, a CNCF incubating project, soon to be graduated. Think of Weave GitOps as a wrapper around Flux that makes its installation and operation easier, without losing any of the sophistication of Flux. Weave GitOps continually reconciles the desired state, stored in Git, with the actual state, running in Kubernetes. When a change is merged into the monitored branch, those changes are immediately applied to Kubernetes. Conversely, any change manually applied to Kubernetes are automatically reverted back to the single source of truth in Git. Configuration drift is eliminated. Now you know how it works. What are the advantages? When using GitOps to manage your Kubernetes clusters, everything is done through Git. The number of people who need direct access to Kubernetes and the cloud platform is significantly reduced. This minimizes the administration overhead of roles-based access control inside Kubernetes and the distribution of Kubernetes and cloud platform keys, thus enhancing security. With a constant reconciliation of configuration, Git is the single source of truth. Your cluster configuration will be what is in Git. Configuration drift is impossible. Git provides a complete audit trail of who changed what and when. Changes can be reviewed and approved via pull requests. Once a change has been merged into the monitored branch, it is immediately applied to the Kubernetes cluster, accelerating delivery. If a change proves to be suboptimal, it's easy to roll back to a previously known good configuration, significantly speeding up time to recovery. This diagram shows a typical workflow for a GitOps deployment. A DevOps engineer uses their normal workflow to create a pull request against the management repository. Once this request is reviewed, approved, and merged, the change is immediately applied to the cluster. Now, let's see it in action. Over to you, Daniel.
Thank you, Steve. Let's move on to the demo part of this talk. We'll be demoing Gloo Edge and Weaveworks GitOps. I'm Daniel Wessels, a field engineer with solo.io and APAC, specifically Sydney, Australia. At the moment, we have a newly provisioned Minikube cluster. So that's ready for us. So here we can see the Minikube cluster was provisioned. Of course, it needs a bit of resources, so just have a look at that. It's got MetaLB as well, not necessarily required, but I do use it for my ingress traffic and service type load balancers. I've also already installed the Weaveworks GitOps CLI version 06.2. And then I have already pre-provisioned the repositories that we will be using for the GitOps demonstration. So there's two repositories, the GitOps config and the Gloo Edge Weaveworks, which is where all the shared infrastructure and applications are. Let's have a quick look at kicking off the bootstrap process. So we can find these commands in the Weaveworks Getting Started page as well. So we'll kick all of these off and then we'll have a look at what's happening as well. So let's have a look at the repositories. As I mentioned, we've got the two repositories. We have essentially the Gloo Edge Weaveworks repository where we have our infrastructure shared services, and that is Gloo Edge itself and Keycloak we'll be using today. And on the application side, we'll be using the Pet Clinic application to install. So that's what that directory is for. This is essentially where you will have all your application packages and manifests already ready. And we'll have a look at the different ways you may be using to install applications and services. That could be either via customized YAML manifests, or you could be using Helm. Both of those ways are available to us, and we'll see them in action during the demo as well. And here we can see it's a fresh repo. On the GitOps config side, essentially the same. We'll have to wait for the bootstrap process to finish before we come back here and have a look at what happens after the bootstrap and what gets layered into it. Okay, so we can actually see that the bootstrap process has completed, and it's completed with pull requests that have been created automatically to the config, GitOps config. And of course, this is important in terms of GitOps as well. Automation is great, but in most cases, we do want some controls. And with GitOps, we can use the Git pull request to insert those controls as need be. So let's go back here, have a look at the pull request, sitting there waiting for us. So in pure demo fashion, I'll just approve that since we know already what is required. So this is what has been created by that GitOps, Weaveworks GitOps bootstrap process. So it's a similar structure to most GitOps tools or some of the GitOps tools that everyone knows in terms of customization and YAML file manifests. It's gone and generated all of those for us and checked them into the repository as well. So on the system side, everything is up and running. Under the hood, Weaveworks GitOps utilizes Flux, and we'll take a bit of a look at that as well in a minute. At the moment, that's it. There's no applications yet. So that's it. Pretty straightforward to get up and running with the Weaveworks GitOps bootstrap process. We've completed the pull request, and now we can use the Weaveworks GitOps UI. And I just run that in a separate terminal because it's using port 40. Okay, good. So now we can start adding our applications via this UI. And again, it's very straightforward. First thing we want to do is install our shared services. So let's call it that actually, shared services. And this is going to include our Gloo Edge installation, and it's also going to include our Keycloak installation, the shared services we're using here. So all I need to do is specify the repositories for where the application lives, and assign temporary access via the token. Of course, for non-demo, you'll take a closer look at the permissions that you're allowing there. Okay, and here I'm pointing to the infrastructure folder, which is where my customization file sits, which will tell Weaveworks GitOps what manifests to run. Okay, so, and then we need to specify the GitOps directory as well. This is where the synchronization between the GitOps and the Kubernetes cluster happens. And of course, there's tokens there that's required as well. So we're ready to submit our first application. Excellent. And again, just to demonstrate GitOps process and controls, we have a pull request that needs to be reviewed, peer-reviewed, reviewed by whoever it may be, managers, to make sure that no unauthorized changes are happening. Okay, good. So if we now take a look again at this Weave GitOps directory, before we had the infrastructure level customizations in system, which bootstrapped everything. Now we actually have a user object as well, which is that application shared services. So if we look at that, you can see that customization has again been created out of that form we've completed. And here you can see the YAML manifestation of that UI form that we completed with the repositories that's required. So Weave GitOps have updated its own configuration and created the necessary manifests to allow it to pull in these services. So if we take a look on the Kubernetes side, we'll now notice that Keycloak is busy installing, Gloo Edge is also being installed, and everything is starting. Okay, we'll wait for those installations to also complete, and from there we'll move on to the pet clinic installation as well. So let's have a look at the UI again. Finish that side. So we now see that the shared services is an application in there, and we've got great visualization of what we have done in our GitOps repositories. So this sort of visualization, of course, helps us humans because it's not necessarily easy to see these dependencies and resources that we are creating just by looking at Git repositories. So that's a really great feature of the Weaveworks GitOps tool, this UI that shows you the dependencies out of the box. And we can see it's picked up the authentication. Again, this is based off the temporary tokens to pull out the information from Git. Another way to look at the sort of progress is to use our Kubernetes commands. So I've got the alias set up for kubectl get. So we firstly getting the customizations, and we have a look at what has been picked up, and we can see everything is happy there. It's picked up the shared services customization. Part of installing these shared services, we are pulling in applications from Helm repositories that has automatically been created as well, and that's up and running. And then, of course, once you have the Helm repository, there's a Helm release. So, and then we can see that it's busy with its installation. See, that's still ongoing, and we can actually tail that process to help us with seeing. Looks like that has completed. Let's take a look here. Everything is up and running. So another thing to sort of look at is the fact that we have now installed Gloo Edge and Keycloak, and we haven't run any kubectl apply commands or any kubectl commands. We have just used Git repository and the manifests in Git to effect those installations, and that's another way to look at GitOps. While Kubernetes have abstracted away SSHing into machines for installs and configurations and getting applications up and running, GitOps is about abstracting kubectl away from us and removing as much as possible humans from touching our operational environments is always a good practice, so that there's no human error. So that's a key thing to see throughout, and we'll see that throughout this demonstration. We are just doing Git commits to effect changes. We don't interact with the Kubernetes API at all. Okay, so let's look at that. Now that we have everything installed, we can do the configuration. So Keycloak, we need to install and configure a couple of users just so that we can use it. Of course, we need a few users to authenticate with. So we run a few configuration scripts. From that, we need those outputs a little bit later. I'll just save them there. Okay, great. So Keycloak is up and running now. Let's install the application. So we go back to our Weave GitOps and we add another application. In this case, let's call it apps. So our applications are living in the same repository under the apps folder here. So for our repository source, via that, authentication as a case store, give it the path, and tell it where the GitOps configuration sits. And submit. Excellent. So that's gone through with the usual pull request. And there we go. So if we now look here, we've got the shared services and we've got the new application. And again, it's taken our form and transformed it into the necessary YAML so that the controllers in the cluster can start acting on what is required to be configured. So if we look here at the applications, you can see Pet Clinic will be installed. So that's staging, customization, and we are installing Pet Clinic. And then Pet Clinic will have its customization, which points to base. So let's take a quick look at that. Pet Clinic is not very robust applications. So in this case, we're just using straightforward Kubernetes YAML by customization. So in this case, we're not using Helm. You don't have to use Helm, but if your application or package has a Helm, you may want to use that. But you can just use straightforward Kubernetes YAML. You can take this file and use kubectl apply -f and point it to this file. So that's essentially how Pet Clinic works. So let's go back to the UI. Okay, now we can have a look at apps, and we can see again that visualization that comes with Weave GitOps. Application is ready to test. So let's have a look on the Kubernetes side quickly. Default namespace. And we can see Pet Clinic is up and running. So now we have everything in place. The application is sitting there, and I'll use another repository from our Solo blogs. If you want to go to solo.io blogs and search on GitOps, you'll find many resources in there. And for the rest of the demo, we can just utilize this repository. And the first thing we want to do is see that the application is up and running. So to do that, we will find the gateway IP address. There's the Gloo Edge. And you can see it sitting on that external IP. So to browse there. Right, application is up and running. What's not so great, it's plain text. So let's convert the traffic to TLS. Okay. To do that, we go to the application repository and we edit its virtual service resource, the Gloo Edge virtual service resource source. And we point it to the TLS certificate, which is a Kubernetes secret. So it can use that to terminate connections to this application for TLS. And then we need to complete our git push. Command. It's not. Okay, so go to the application, sync that up. And now it's synced up. So we change to HTTP. Yes. Of course, it's just a self-signed, so the warnings will be there. But we can see without changing any application code, Gloo Edge has switched the traffic to encrypted TLS. And with that in place, we can now add authentication. We don't want to do authentication across plain text. So let's have a look at that. For that, we'll need to edit the application's authentication policy. Again, that's a Gloo Edge custom resource. We'll activate that policy via the customization file, and then we'll go back to the virtual service again and add the authentication section for the virtual service, which is essentially where the proxy is listening for the application. So let's start that quickly. again, not touching the cluster or kube apply or anything like that. Now, if we sync up the application, see that is successfully updated. And now if we go back to the application, refresh, we are prompted for a login. Oops. Yeah. Excellent. So thank you very much for looking at this demo. Back to you, Steve.
Thanks, Daniel, for a great demo. It really showed how you can use GitOps to manage service meshes across your Kubernetes clusters. If you want to evaluate GitOps yourself, download a copy of Weave GitOps-Core for free. Weaveworks regularly hosts hands-on workshops. Sign up on the events page.